The Punisher, Season 2, Episode 6, Nakazat.
I hear a lot of people saying the blues, but I'm gonna tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues. When you ain't got no money.
Welcome back, fellow Defenders, to this episode of Defenders TV Podcast, episode 211, where we are talking about Season 2 of The Punisher, and we are talking about Nakazat. Hello there, fellow Defenders. I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of the other hosts, Derek.
And I'm one of your hosts, Chris. And oh my god, I think if we have to keep saying Nakazat throughout this show, it's going to get difficult. It's literally just going to be us giggling in the background and Derek, our illustrious producer, just constantly going, I'm going to dead.
Well, exactly, because they'll never hear you laughing over and over again at Nakazat. We could just translate it, because it is the Russian word for punish. Really simply, that's where the name of the episode came from. So we could just call it Episode 6 Punish, if we wanted to.
Or we could just go, this episode.
Yeah.
Like, we can go colloquial if we would, or we can go the ep, or because we're hip, we're down with the kids. So that ep was solid, man. Lit.
Oh, let's not, Chris.
Yeah, let's not do that. I might come off worst on that one.
Definitely.
Yeah. But of course, before we get into our spoiler-filled review or ep, please remember, get in contact with us over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV Podcast. We have our spoiler posts on there where you can leave any of your thoughts or discussions about this season of The Punisher. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can send in voicemails through our website at Defenders TV Podcast, or send us in your thoughts by email. Just send them to feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com.
Yes, we've already got a piece of feedback about the entire season already, which I haven't read because our wonderful fellow Defender who sent in that feedback marked it saying this is the full season. So I haven't even read it yet. Thanks so much for that feedback. We will be reading it on our final episode. And anybody else who wants to send in your feedback for your thoughts on the full season, just mark it as a full season spoilers, or any episode that you want to talk about, mark it which episode it is so we don't spoil ourselves as we go.
Thanks for all the feedback so far as well. There's been a ton coming in, and it's really good to hear everyone's thoughts and views on this second season of The Punisher.
Yes.
But without further ado, let's get into some of the episode details. Derek, who was this written and directed by?
Well, the episode was written by Christine Boylan. This is her second writing credit on The Punisher. She wrote The Judas Goat, which was episode 6 of season 1 as well. She's also written 2 episodes of Cloak and Dagger, so a couple of other Marvel shows that she's worked on. And not only Marvel, she's also worked on DC shows. She worked on Constantine, writing 2 episodes of the original season of Constantine as well. So lots of work.
That was a rest in peace. That was a great
show
when it was around.
It was. I feel sorry that poor Matt is overdoing Constantine on Legends of Tomorrow now, which is kind of a comedy show in comparison to Constantine, which was more of an adult show than most of the DC shows. It's a very different character, or it's a similar character in a very different situation with Legends of Tomorrow.
Exactly. I think it was one that, if it had came out now, post Black Lightning, post Titans, it would have found its place.
Definitely.
And it had a loyal following.
Yeah.
But yes, a shame. But at least she's with us now, writing Punisher.
Exactly.
Thank you, Christine.
The other thing as well about Constantine is it had Dr. Fate in it. The DC version of kind of Doctor Strange in a way.
Well, it had his helmet, yes.
It had his helmet, yeah, but it was so juicy and promised so much.
Yeah.
And Constantine was great as well.
You never know, with Matt Ryan still under contract at DC doing the work on Legends of Tomorrow, and with the DC Universe streaming service out there, you never know, there may be a return of a Constantine for a season 2 or for a standalone show as well. You never know. Maybe Christine Boylan can go and work on that as well. But directing this episode was Jamie M. Dagg. This is the first episode that Jamie's directed for The Punisher. He does have a background in music videos. He's done Broken Social Scene and Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. Done videos for them as well. So very cool.
Excellent stuff, yeah. Broken Social Scene. Gosh, I need to get back into them.
And we saw Black Rebel Motorcycle Club live last year, didn't we?
We did.
Crazily enough. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the episode?
Sure. Amy and Frank Castle develop one of the photos of 2 young men embracing at a mutual friend's funeral. With the photo in place, Amy and Frank use it as bait to lure out the Russian billionaire Poloznev to confront him about his involvement in the events in Chicago. After kidnapping Poloznev, he reveals all about the Schultz's pursuit to put their son, David Schultz, into the White House, and explains the photos were for blackmail and to control the closeted David Schultz and his ambitious parents. Elsewhere, life begins to get intense again for Billy Russo, as his relationships with Dr. Dumont, a surprise Curtis, and his growing band of veterans become increasingly complicated. Meanwhile, Dinah Madani's official story of events between Russo and her come under fire from Detective Sergeant Mahoney, and she is paid a visit by the Pilgrim. As events begin to collide, Dinah, Curtis, and Frank come together to try and figure out what to do, as the Pilgrim's mission leads him to do something that Frank was unable to do: put a bullet in Poloznev.
So finally, a reveal of a bit of the major plot that's been going on in 6 episodes this season. Finally, we have the photographs developed. Chris, do you want to kick us off with our bullet point number 1?
Yeah, it's a photo for blackmail.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an interesting opening.
Yes.
So I think probably, as of right now, the most interesting opening of this season and last season, because it essentially has Frank going to, well, we'll call it a porn studio, but we can make assumptions based on dress and discussions in there that this is a paedophilic studio.
Yeah.
And the man who Frank decides to redecorate his face with openly says, look, I don't care, the negatives stay with you, there's no digital trace, this is all below board.
Yes. I've never actually thought about the opposite of all above board. That's actually exactly what it is, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, below board.
There also is that really intriguing opening where you have Frank and Amy standing at the door, and Frank is trying to persuade him to let him in. And that's something that Frank can usually do just by going, I will kill you through this door if you don't let me through. And it's the exact opposite with this guy. He's got a really heavy door blocking the way in, and it cuts to Amy, who's dressed in schoolgirl outfit, basically. So it does give an indication of what kind of place they're going to. And obviously the reason they're going to use this place is because she's going to be developing these really sensitive photographs and doesn't want to have any form of negatives and any form of what actually is within those photographs released at all. So
it's weird because until that moment that they cut to Amy and kind of, take in what she's wearing, I actually thought this was a safe house.
Yeah.
And when the slide opens and then closes again, it's kind of that moment where the guy behind there was like going, oh no, it's Frank. I've got to deal with Frank again. And then it takes this kind of different twist, where they're going just simply to get the negative of the photograph and develop it. So, it was really interesting. And I love the fact that Frank so wants to kill this guy.
Yeah.
And yet he's pulled back from that by Amy. And then as they walk out, where she goes, you can always burn down the place if it makes you feel better. Which was a really nice touch, because actually he will probably now get more justice than simply just being killed, because obviously the fire brigade will be called. They'll see what it is about the studio. His cover is effectively blown. So I thought it was kind of poetic justice from Amy. But it constrained Frank. And of course we see this constraint a bit with Frank, all the way through this episode, because you do have that nice, moment where him and Amy talk about Frank's, own children, and in particular his daughter.
Absolutely.
And it kind of unsettles him throughout this episode a bit, which I kind of quite liked, because when he comes to his circle of safeness with Curtis and Madani, where it is like a therapy session for the three of them, which again I thought was really, really quite cool. He's like at confession, where he's like, I let off 2 people that I should have killed today.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling great about that. Now, help me out with this.
Yeah, absolutely. This might be my favourite episode from John Bernthal of both seasons. I think the strengths he uses in this episode, the lengths he goes to, that moment with the pornographer where he's about to kill him, he's like a caged animal in that moment. You can hear him breathing and seething, wanting to kill this guy. And a couple of scenes later, sitting on the bench talking to Amy about his daughter, you can feel the tears in his eyes welling up at the idea that his daughter would only be about a year younger than Amy. He is treating her like he would his daughter. He's being as protective of her. And Amy's trying to get across to him, let her live in your mind, let her breathe and let her feel like she is alive in your mind, so you can get over the pain that has been caused to you. And it's a really wonderful performance from him. Yeah,
and I think it's also they're actively showing us now that Frank has a soft spot. His daughter is his blind spot, and that's caused Amy.
Yeah.
That's cause later on we'll talk about why he lets another person off. Because of that person having a daughter and around the same age. So this is interesting. It's becoming, his blind spot's probably the wrong word, but it's Achilles heel.
Yeah.
It's probably the best.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you think of the Punisher as a violent machine who dispenses justice.
Yeah.
And punishment. But actually, with John Bernthal, as you said, it's like, yes, we get a very ripped man doing some crazy action and blowing people's heads off, but then you get these scenes where they expand out why the character is the way he is.
Yeah.
And why he actually does have this bleeding heart. And I'm not talking about it in actual Frank putting his hand in, grabbing someone's heart, pulling it out and going, I've now got a bleeding heart. I mean, emotionally.
Yeah.
He's kind of like, he has this Achilles heel.
Well, I've already told you guys before we started recording this episode, I much prefer this version of the Punisher TV show than the one we got in episode 5, where Frank is doing things like pulling people's hearts out through their chests. That's not my version of a TV show I enjoy, so I much prefer this version of a show where you see the emotional wreckage behind the eyes of an actor doing a great performance. Or there is some violence in here as well, of course, like as there is in every single episode. But that's not my purpose for watching any TV show, is just to see things get violent every week. It'd be pretty boring for me to do that. So I'm glad we have an actor with the emotional range of John Bernthal doing this show, because he's so good. And, you know, I know him from Walking Dead. I know him from other shows that he's been on and other movies that he's been in. And he is a very, very good actor. But I think he's showing his best at this show.
I think the good thing about this Punisher is that he is constrained. He does have that emotional connection. He can lose it, absolutely, and he gets violent. But I think that hopefully is kept to a minimum, because I think it's good to see that come out of the box as well, to see how unhinged he can become.
Yeah.
However, that restraint, you know, you had it with Madani and with Micro in the first season, where they kind of just reined him back a bit sometimes, so he would shoot someone in the leg rather than in the head.
Exactly.
And that, I think we have this same influence here with Amy, and it adds something different. It adds the layers to this character, whereas it becomes a bit of a slugfest if it is just him sort of being uncompromising. I think it adds that compromising of Frank Castle and the Punisher, because it connects to his family, and the reason why he does this is really, really good. And I think that was a great part here.
Absolutely, and it's also important for Amy as a character to have these conversations with Frank. There is a very important conversation that they have where Amy says, I know I wouldn't be alive if you hadn't killed all those guys, but it doesn't mean I'm happy about it. I don't like killing. I don't want people to be killed because of me. But I know that by doing that, I'm still alive. You know, it's an important conversation to have, and it's an important line to find with Frank, because otherwise he can stray into the villain of the piece, because he's going around killing everybody willy-nilly without any kind of reasoning behind it. So having Amy there to just question, do you think it's right to just kill everybody you think is wrong, is an important conversation to have. And we do have Frank, again, treating her like a daughter here, showing her how to get a gun from the assailant, teaching her that if she takes a gun off someone, be prepared to use it immediately, no matter who that person is, no matter who that person was in the past for you. Kind of teaching her a little bit of the punishment. Chris, you've talked about her a few times as being possibly a future sidekick for the Punisher. Another person that will go out and take punishment and vengeance out on other people. And we see a little bit of it here. I don't think Amy's ever going to get there because of this conversation she has with Frank, but I think this will definitely come into play in episode 10 or 11, where she takes a gun off an assailant and uses it on them because of Frank's training here.
So I guess I agree. I now am less that she is the Punisherette. I don't think that might happen.
No.
Little Punisher, LIL, with the apostrophe. Little Punisher.
Drawn by Scotty Young, of course.
Of course. I don't know what they're doing with this character of Amy. I'm bringing this in now because it kind of very much relates to what you were just saying there, which is, if they had have turned her into Little Punisher, right? Where she slowly, her arc is that she gets angrier and angrier, and Frank starts training her.
Right.
And then she has redemption. And she goes, I'm not this person. I can't do this anymore. I need to be better. Then I think that's good. But what we're getting now is she's willing to chastise Frank, but when he calls her actually on her BS around, like, you were there taking photos of them, and your actions caused the death of your friends, not this other thing. It doesn't sink in, and she just, like, she does the normal 16-year-old type thing, which I understand. They're playing on that part, which she's a 16-year-old, she's etc. She grabs her stuff and cause, like, I was like, I'm running away, and I was like, oh, you can't.
Absolutely. Like, there are moments where she's the adult in the room. There's the moments when she's talking to Frank in that way, as, you know, a contemporary of him, knowing exactly what he's gone through. And there are other moments, as you say, Chris, where it jumps back to her being a teenage girl. He is so harsh in that version of a comment from the Punisher, but it does go to underline the kind of attitude he has to everything. Why he walks into a warehouse with 60 bad guys in there and kills them all is because if you're in that warehouse, it's your own fault. You made that choice, and today I've got a gun and I'm going to kill you. That's his whole concept. If he had walked in on Amy and his gang doing a plan and they were in the room, they would be dead, and he wouldn't question himself. So that's exactly what he's saying to her is, you made this choice, you made the choice to be in that gang, all of them made their choice to be there, and they're all dead because of those choices. Yeah, it's a really harsh moment, and I can kind of see why it gets her back up, because she's thinking of herself as a complete innocent here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the whole thing with the gun lessons as well, like, I could see the point of that, with respect to that, you know, the situation that they're in and so on. Yeah. But I must say, then I kind of lost it, really, because Amy goes, I bet you're a good dad. Did you teach any of this to your daughter, effectively? It's like, what? I was like, it's not that crazy, you know, family life in North America, where you, like, have
train a 12-year-old
training guns and all this, and it kind of took me out of it for a moment, because it was just like, okay, this is really weird. Normally it's like how to cook, or maybe you're helping someone in the garden
learn how to play golf or something.
Yeah, or you play a sport, not like how to wrestle a firearm or even shoot one. Like, I mean, okay, it was a little weird, and it took me out of it there a bit.
I think what Amy's trying to do is underline again for her that this is a really intimate moment between her and Frank.
Maybe,
This is a moment that she feels really close to Frank, and did he have moments like this? But I know what you mean. It does come across as, did you ever train your daughter to use an Uzi? You know, it's like, no,
exactly.
That would be weird.
I was like, okay, and next week we'll show you how to do, like, a nail bomb or something like that. It's like a bit weird. But I think, just to segue from this point into our second bullet point, the plan to take out Poloznev, and everything around these photos. You know, the developed photo that they do here are two guys kind of embracing and kissing. And we've heard previously, you know, that it was at a funeral. There were a lot of people upset, mourning, crying, and also kissing. But it's more of a familiar kiss, I think, rather than anything more than that.
Yeah. It's a weird one, isn't it? They said that line, didn't they? They said that people were hugging, embracing, and kissing. And all of us heard it. And I think we even repeated it on the podcast. That's the line she said. But we didn't really realize that that's what they were saying. That it was two guys were together that two guys were together at the funeral, and that she took photographs of that, and that's what she was there for. We didn't realize that that's exactly what the whole story was hinged on at all.
No, exactly. And I think ultimately as well, for me, I'm like, absolutely with Frank and Amy. I think they express it best in the caravan, in the Punisher's new headquarters, you know, in this real kind of broken down static caravan, which is like, you shrug and you go, well, so what? You know, it's two guys kissing. Who cares? And I think, in a sense, I think this is part of one of the bigger issues I have with this episode, is that I'm absolutely with Frank and Amy on this. However, for the Schultzes, this would be devastating, and for their plans and ambitions for their son, Daniel Schultz. And also, because we've not seen Daniel Schultz and what he's doing, is he in a sham marriage? Does he have children? Then it's something here where that photo or the weight of that for the Schultzes would have been better if we had spent more time with the Schultzes.
100%.
To really figure this out, because ultimately what we do is, in this, and I really like the plan where they, try and, bring Poloznev into this, at the restaurant and so on.
Yeah.
It's really, really nicely done. But ultimately we get to find out about the Schultzes from Poloznev. And even if over the course of the last few episodes we had seen Daniel on the campaign trail with his family, with his kids, with his pet dog or something like that, like being interviewed in front of the cameras where maybe he's giving contradictory ideas as to how his campaign will run. And similarly for Anders and Elisa, we've just seen them as being sort of benevolent to the Pilgrim and his wife, and being in this church situation. And actually, really, and ironically, they're more like the Koch brothers, in that they own huge amounts of wealth. They have these big agro interests, these big commercial interests, all this kind of thing. And they're trying to buy their son a way to the White House so that they can influence policy and their own pocket, I presume, and their own vision of how society should be.
Or at least their industry, yeah.
And if only we had gotten a bit more of this from them,
Absolutely. Like, you think of shows like House of Cards, which is made for Netflix as well. There's seasons of that where two presidential candidates are going up against each other, where you see a couple of insights into the home life of one of the presidential candidates. And over 4 or 5 episodes, it gets built up, and then there's a big reveal about something behind that candidate. That's what you would do in this episode. If that's what's so important here about these photographs, tell us. Like, really, we're 5 episodes into this show, and I thought the Schultzes were, leaders in their local church, and we were going to get this really religious background going up against something else. That the whole challenge was going to be that this right-wing religious group were going up against the rest of society. But actually, it's much bigger than that. They're trying to put together the new Republican candidate for the presidential race, and it's falling apart because they're putting a platform together that this guy is an all-American character. But we don't know any of that. We're being told that. There's an old adage for filmmaking, which is show, don't tell. It's a film. It's not a book. You don't have a character reading out some lines. You show things so that the audience can get behind and understand what's going on. And I think this choice here is terrible. And I suppose when you're trying to make a show like this, you're trying to find something that would be controversial about a possible future president. And in real life, there's so many controversial things that have gone on in presidential races over the last couple of years that maybe this just isn't controversial enough. Maybe they've chosen the wrong thing here to show in a TV show, because it stands out as, oh, well, this guy's parents don't have any idea of who he is as a human being, so, well, they're idiots. Is it going to matter to the general populace of America that this guy's gay, given everything else that goes on and who gets through to the presidential suite in real life? Does this feel like a big enough scandal to happen? No, because we don't know whether he's married and has kids, and we don't know whether he's been standing on the anti-LGBT platform. Is that what he stands for? We don't know any of that, because it's a Russian guy saying, this is what I think is happening, and I'm going to be blackmailing them for it. Is it worth Pilgrim going around shooting people in the head left, right, and centre because their son's gay? Like, it doesn't make any sense, because we haven't heard any of that or seen any of it in the previous 5 episodes.
I'm right with you guys on this. Literally, either certain scenes have ended up on the cutting room floor, which I severely doubt, based on the showrunner's previous work. I think this is just a misstep, and it's a massive leap. Misstep right now for me. It's because the reveal isn't a reveal. Like, they've been leading to this reveal of, like, why are the guys being chased? Why are they out to kill Amy and Frank now? Well, and Frank now. What was on those photos that took literally 5.5 hours nearly? Okay, let's say it's like 5.5 hours technically to get to tease this out. And it's basically oh no, the titans of industry, the Schultzes, have a son who they were grooming to be a president, to take control so that they could put a presidential candidate there. As the Russian says, it's like, there's no longer going to be countries, it's going to be corporations, and they are the all-American. And, oh no, he's gay and kissed a man. But without he was either anti-LGBTQ, or he's married with kids, or multiple other things. It has no weight in today's
Absolutely.
world.
Like if you set up an episode where this is a younger Mike Pence
Yes.
character, and then you have a photograph of him kissing another man, yeah, absolutely, I'm right there with you. I see what's going on here. But if you don't do that, to me, it's just two guys kissing, and their parents don't understand it. It's not like we have never had a gay Republican in America. There have been gay Republicans before. That's all this is right now, unless you tell me some more information or show me some more information about why they wouldn't like this.
Now, I'm going to put one caveat just on this, right? Which is, maybe this is leading to something else, right? So maybe, like, again, we are 6 episodes in, we've got 7 episodes left. If this is leading to something else, and the showrunner is and the writing team have this grand plan, I'm like, okay, cool. You zigged when you should have zagged, but overall it was worth it. Cool.
Yeah.
If not, then I think this was potentially one of the biggest missteps, because you've basically given us what we thought was going to be this massive reveal. And for me, it was like, I think you said it best. It should have been, oh, it's a Mike Pence, and oh my God, like, this makes so much sense. Oh my God, I can see why they're going to kill everyone. And instead, it's like, well, like, okay.
There should have been more context of the Schultzes in terms of Daniel and what he's doing as a senator, and his family life and his campaign, along with his relationship with his parents, and the fact that his parents are effectively like the Koch brothers, which are trying to buy influence and power and maintain that at the height of the political system in the USA. So it's one of those things, I think, that really needed to have that context, and it could have been done just as little snippets. It's like with the CIA and special ops link in the first season, where you had these cutbacks to the guy with the one eye, and to the CIA, the head of the CIA, and you get the story of their side as well, and it leads to the impact when the head of the CIA suddenly is having that conversation in New York by the Hudson River with the guy from Special Ops, where she's like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. She makes that choice, and it has impact here. As you say, you're kind of like going, okay, well then the contradictions potentially in the Schultz's characters, both Anders and Eliza, are kind of obscured. They just seem maybe silly that they have put their faith in a son that they maybe already knew was gay. If that so much conflicted with their own sexuality and how, a good solid family life, in inverted commas, should be. So it's a shame, I think, because it really took the power out of this photograph, or these photographs being developed.
Yeah, and I'm totally with you as well, Chris. If this is just a swerve ball that's being thrown at us in episode 6 and we're reading it wrong, and then next episode they say, no, it wasn't anything to do with that particular photograph. There's another photograph on there that's even more important. There's someone alive in the photographs that isn't supposed to be alive, for example, or something like that. Like we were speculating before, if it's not this particular photograph, if that's been read incorrectly in this episode, then cool, I'm absolutely down with that. That's great. But yeah, having the mystery of these characters for 5 episodes of the show and then revealing this, it feels like it's the wrong shorthand to choose. But there is so much else to talk about in this episode. Let's move on. Just part of that plan that we saw, where we have Amy and Frank taking out Poloznev in the restaurant. I do love seeing the characters working together. I love the idea of having Amy, this streetwise kid, using her smarts to get into the restaurant, serve the table, have the photograph planted at the front of the menu when she's sitting in front of Poloznev. That's really cool. I love Frank doing his drunken master moment outside of the car when he's, channeling his inner Jackie Chan as he falls against the back of the car and says he's just going to pee against the back of it to get the driver to come out, and then just punches him in the face and gets in. I love when Poloznev goes out with his guard exactly as he's probably done a million times, gets into the back of the car, his guard gets into the front, and Frank just punches him and drives off. Great fun moments that look like they've really put together a good plan to get this Russian. I think it's really cool.
I really like the Amy part, the grifting, the con job. For me, that's something, and I think she actually does bring... I've talked about the character, but now I'm talking about the skill sets of the character. This other side of Frank.
Definitely.
Which is like, Frank is direct, brash, like literally, oh, there's a door, let's kick it in. Whereas Amy brings, okay, no, there are other ways. And I literally loved that bit where she walks out and she turns the corner, and then I copped what she was doing. And I had seen the trailer.
Right.
I had seen her like flip her dress, a skirt around. It didn't register with me what was happening.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, this is very cool. Like, this is the side that like Frank's Team Punisher needs.
Yes.
Which is like, you can be crafty, because we know if Amy was not part of this Team Punisher, Frank would have just walked into the restaurant. We would have had a massive gun battle with the, like, turns out like 20 people who were also with Poloznev as well. Yeah. And then that would have been it. And it would have been like Frank like fighting 20 people, and then so this is, they single them out, and I was like, that's cool.
Absolutely. Not every plan takes a hammer. Some plans need a scalpel. And you're right, Chris. There's a great moment there when Poloznev stands up, and then suddenly there's about 12 other people in the restaurant that all stand up at the same time.
Yeah, that was good.
When you don't realise it's not just him at his table with his two guards. There's loads of guards all around him. It just shows the power of the guy, I suppose, and how difficult it must have been to get at him. And that's why this whole plan works.
So, quick question. And look, first of all, I don't want to be too down on this episode, right? And I'm trying not to be, because our thing is that we look for the silver linings and etc.
Absolutely.
Right? Did they miss the mark with Poloznev? Like, we got the impression that we supposed to get the impression that Poloznev was a titan of an industry. Yes. He was KGB. They didn't directly say KGB, but they implied he was Russian intelligence agency, special forces. So he was pretty much a hired spy killer. Did they miss the mark slightly? Because when Frank does kidnap him, he takes him to an abandoned warehouse. We get the explanation of everything in the photos and stuff like that. First of all, Poloznev just gives it up. Yeah. He just basically happily gives all this information out, and then he basically he resigns himself that he's going to die and asks Frank. I did like the "don't shoot me in the face" because I did that, or I saw someone like that and the wife couldn't identify me. Yeah, but he just basically resigns himself to life and then mentions his death. Like, I was expecting, I don't know, like this character, this was like the NPC in a video game, right? So they come in for one mission. They're not very well rounded. You would kind of expect more, and then they're done. Yeah, like that's it. Like, literally, I was expecting, like, because we got the big Wikipedia reveal from the Russian gangs. I was expecting almost like an anti-Frank, not an anti-Frank, if you know what I mean. Like a big, huge titan who was ex-KGB, right. Like. Basically, what's the guy from Rocky? Carl Drago.
Drago, yes.
Drago, yeah. Like, I was expecting that to a degree, and what we got was not, like, the acting was fine, and like, again, this is probably me. My expectations were higher for this.
Oh, I know what you mean, and you have that expectation because of the list of achievements that are associated with this guy. As you say, this Wikipedia entry that tells you all about this guy and what his past is, but they were going for a different shorthand. They were going for, this is a Russian who wants to control the presidency. So he has to be a manipulative spy, effectively, who lives in America. That's what it's supposed to be. And we hear him, he doesn't just give this information up to Frank, he gleefully gives it up. He goes, we got this photograph and we're going to blackmail this guy and he's going to be in our pocket. Like, that's what he's saying. He's going, look how smart we are, as the wonderful mother Russia is, because we're able to get photographs that will embarrass this guy. And when he gets into power, which he will, he'll be in our pocket. That's what they're going for. That's the shorthand they're going for. But yes, you're right. When you think of, ex-KGB or ex-Secret Service in Russia, you think of the James Bond type of Russian military kind of thing. You think of those type of powerful people, whereas this guy just looks like, I don't know, a lawmaker, I guess. He looks like someone that works in Russian government, perhaps. You know?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I was kind of happy enough with Poloznev here. I mean, I do like Frank calling out that he goes, call me old-fashioned, I don't work with Russians. I thought that was a nice little moment. I think for me, I probably also expected him to live beyond this episode, and maybe, you know, we do hear him say to Frank, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. And so I kind of thought that by necessity there would be some working together where ultimately Frank uses the Russian to undermine the Schultzes, but ultimately bags the Russian as well to show that he was trying to influence the electoral process in the US.
Right.
But obviously that doesn't pan out. But I think Poloznev to me looks like that ex-KGB who has then been entrusted with assets. They've kind of gleaned their assets and become really rich through the fall of the old Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And maybe with time, he's become soft, but also he's involved, he's important because of the grace of the Russian president, allowing him to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So even though he is all powerful, his power is based on sand, because if he doesn't keep favor with the Russian president, he can equally be gone. So it kind of makes him timid again. But
absolutely. And remember, this would have been written, last summertime, maybe a little bit before that. So obviously, with the climate that's going on, you never want to have an American character going, "Oh yes, I'll work with the Russians," for any reason at all. At that time, that would not have been part of the writing process. Saying that there is an acceptable reason to work with the Russians. There's no acceptable reason at the time when they were writing this anyway. So I do see what you mean, and definitely there is connections here that are being revealed just purely because this guy is Russian and purely because he's trying to influence the political process. I think all of those are shorthands that the writers are trying to use to give you an impression of where they want to go with the show. I'm just not sure whether they all work brilliantly well.
Yeah. Do you remember the film Red or Red 2? Retired and Deadly?
Absolutely. Yeah.
There was a Russian there. There was a Russian guy in that who ended up his character ended up kind of being in love with Helen Mirren, and it was brilliant. He was literally what this guy was supposed to be, which is ex-KGB, retired, living in America, oligarch status. I think that's what they were going for, and they just slightly missed the mark.
Right.
I think that's potentially the way. Anyway, gentlemen, I think that's enough of Poloznev, unless we have anything more to talk about there.
No, that's it. I think we've got two Billy points coming up, because there's two big moments, really, in Billy's life that happened in this episode. Bullet point number 3, with Billy realising Dr. Dumont's methods. We kind of see him peeking behind the curtain of Dr. Dumont. There's one big problem, I suppose, if you're trying to treat one of your patients with therapy to help them out of a situation that they're in. If they're living in your house and you've got your records there, they're going to read your records and read your thoughts about what way you're going to guide them. And that's exactly what happens here. We hear that she did allow him to listen in on the session with Jake. That's why she had Jake over the house, because it did seem a bit weird that she wasn't bringing him to an office, that this other member of Special Forces who has a very similar situation to Billy is sitting in the same house while Billy's there, overhearing it. We didn't call it out last episode, but you did know there was something going on. But we do hear from Dr. Dumont that was on purpose to try and help Billy out. But yeah, there's a couple of interesting things that we're kind of leaning towards here. We see that he's reading this other patient that possibly has the same condition as Billy. Anybody else go and check every single Marvel comic book to find out who KM is at all?
Yeah, and I can't figure it out.
I was like, if it was the other way around and it was Moon Knight, you'd be going, okay, right, we got a reference in here, but no.
They are going for some very distinct points. But before we do that, I also want to call out that she also, when she let Billy listen in on her session, she also lets Billy look in through the door at her. So we get this scene where we see scars on her spine.
Yeah.
And we knew she had scars on her hand. There were lots of cuts, I think. And she's obviously just getting dressed. And Billy's walking down the corridor and looks in through the door. And rather than say anything, it's a very slow interaction where she does, in my opinion, give Billy a bit of a signal, and then slams the door on him, but slowly. And I'm like, okay, you're being about as subtle as a brick in the face in this storyline, but cool. I know where you're going.
Yeah,
that's okay. I don't know if you guys want to talk about this, because I'm the one who's been saying this moment is coming for a while.
In fact, let's put the pin in it, Chris. You've been saying for the last while that you've been getting some vibes of Harley Quinn for a while. Some of our regular Defenders TV podcast listeners know that myself and John have been covering Gotham TV podcast, and they've just revealed their Harley Quinn and their Joker on that show in the last couple of weeks. So I'm totally seeing this is a much more realistic version of that relationship.
Yeah.
And unfortunately comes with exactly the same problems that the Harley Quinn-Joker relationship come from. He has got his hand around her throat, forcing her to a table, and goes to kiss her, and the camera pulls away, and we don't get the end of that scene, but it looks like he's forcing himself upon her. Now, whether she had a moment where she closed the door too slowly for him earlier on in the episode or not, I don't think there was any reason why that particular scene happened, other than Billy feels alone and he's in the house of a therapist at the moment. But it just feels really wrong to watch it. It feels like you needed a little moment afterwards. Or if you were going to say that they were starting a relationship, it definitely shouldn't be starting this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, I like that everything kind of deepened a bit here between Russo and Dr. Dumont. They've both got something to lose, says Russo, after he's just made that cup of tea. It seems to me that, all those scars on her from him, something that's happened in the hospital or even beforehand.
Maybe.
Does it go deeper than what we think? I think I really like that she is, getting compromised, but in effect she's put herself in that position anyway. We see with Mahoney coming in to take subpoena the files that she holds on Billy Russo for his investigation, and she takes out a few pages from the file and hides them from him. So I kind of like this. I like that she's connected him and these other veterans, because here we see that this band is getting bigger. So I just wonder how deep this really goes and how long it's been going for.
She does say, I didn't reveal that you were here to Mahoney, because what would you have done? Because Billy has invaded her home and is now living with her and effectively keeping her prisoner. He says to her, when he comes back after going to visit the guys, he goes, I left. And she goes, please don't leave again, or at least don't get caught if you go. So it's almost like he's turned her into a prisoner in her own home. We know she has some issues with the outside world. We saw those in a previous episode, but is there a little bit of what we said before, the Stockholm Syndrome, a little bit, where he's pushing her into situations that she wouldn't have naturally gotten herself into by living in that home? Yeah,
no, there is. We do get the sense that she did leave and comes back and she's still in her job.
Yeah.
This is what the stink is. It's the Joker and Harley Quinn, and it's... Now, I'm with you on this. I did not need... her to stab him to force a kiss on her, and then fade to black.
Yeah,
like if this moment this is where they're going, it should have more organically happened from her deciding to kiss him, or not him forcing himself on her.
Yeah.
Now, again, I say this with a pinch of salt that the writers may be going somewhere with this. And I'm like, okay, again, I'm reading into this like one scene too much, but what I'm starting to get the sense of is KM was a previous patient who had similar problems as Billy did. She had a romantic engagement, most likely with KM, and now she is... And it all went badly. KM is dead, most likely, or something along those lines. And she is transferring all that love, attention, craziness onto Billy. Because she wants to fix Billy.
Yeah.
And Billy is taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
Can I be really stupid here for a minute? I know Curtis is normally spelled C.
It is,
but is it, I don't know, some weird... abomination of his name. That
No, his name in the show is
she's
definitely spelled
doing
with a
here.
C. Yeah.
Okay, Grant.
It's Curtis Hoyle. But it could have been KMCH, and the M looks like a H, and she doesn't know how to spell his first name properly, maybe. It could be
It is
like
Dr. Scribble. It is Dr. We
is.
know Dr. Scribble is notoriously hard to read.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's move on to more about Billy, into our kind of fourth point,
Yeah.
bullet point for this episode, because Billy is building his new company. What we want to call this bullet point is the mask is on for Billy, because, oh good, like, why did she keep his gun and mask? That was the bit I was like, she took the mask and gun home. Okay. It was a bit of a strange one.
That's
but
true.
anyway.
He took the mask off and gave it to her, didn't he? I suppose, as we said last episode, this is to do with the therapy for Billy, so potentially she might have thought that they could continue the therapy when he gets caught and put back in prison next time, which is what she thought was happening when he was going on the run. But yeah, that is a really weird moment. Maybe she had backups at home, but you're right. Really interestingly. But we do have this moment, and I know, John, you were saying before that you really love the mask on him, that it adds a little bit of depth to this kind of villainous side of Billy. I love that he uses it to cover himself up when he goes to meet Curtis, and gets this conversation back in again, that he doesn't remember what happened to him. He doesn't remember all the things he did in the past. Curtis was absolutely terrified of his former friend because he had him held at gunpoint in his apartment, you know? There's been a terrible relationship between Curtis and Billy, and it's an interesting conversation to have. Well, if one side remembers that and is still terrified of the other side, how does that relationship continue?
Yeah,
You know?
I think this was really good, this conversation between Russo and Curtis. I love the fact that Russo goes, you know, in my head, we're still brothers.
Yeah.
This is hard for me. It was a real nice moment, and even just that, you know, he's trying to figure out still what's happened. But I also think then that Curtis kind of, you know, he addresses this moment about whether we should or should not feel sorry for Russo. And I think, you know, we said, I think 2 episodes ago, well, no, we don't.
Yeah.
And I think here it's, again, Curtis goes, but are you sorry enough to hand yourself in and pay for your crimes, for what you've done? And of course, Billy isn't. So that mask is revealed, you know, that it comes off, that Billy deep down, whilst maybe he still feels that it's because he doesn't know what he's done, if that indeed is still the truth, he will not hand himself in. Yeah. And he says this to Dumont as well, that he would have killed Mahoney if she had told him. So he is ultimately, has this darkness within him that makes him choose poorly, effectively, when it comes to what he should do. And I like that Curtis sort of pulls that out from him. I think that was really, really nice. I think also unfortunately for Curtis, you know, we see him earlier with his new lady, having hotel sex, you know, effectively to keep her safe, so that he's not doing it back at his apartment where she might get caught up and embroiled within this whole Russo thing. Yet Russo does find him quite easily.
Exactly.
And you wonder to what extent, you know, the other veterans there are playing a part, if at all, because, we just don't know. He's looking for Billy through them, and it seems as though Billy has gotten to find him because of them. He says, you know, that they were asking about him.
Yeah.
You know, he knows on the grapevine that he's been looked for by Curtis. So I kind of like this twist up where ultimately Billy gets ahead of him.
I do wish the veterans were living by the old World War II idea of loose lips sink ships, because, you know, these two should not know where the other one is. Curtis is genuinely in hiding here, you know. I do love this conversation. The other thing I really like about it is the fact that Billy is asking who it is that caused his face to be sliced open. Who is it that caused this? He's looking for the simple answer, which is, give me the person I need to point my gun at for doing this to me. And Curtis refuses because he knows it's way, way deeper, and Billy is never going to give him the opportunity to explain how deep the story goes and why Frank did it to him. There's no way that Billy would ever listen to that, and all Billy wants is the name. So I'm really intrigued at how they're managing those two characters. I think it's probably one of the best things in the episode, really, is these two playing off each other, because you can see it all behind, again, Curtis holding this information in. Billy knows he has it, and he's going, I'm not telling you that. This is way too deep for you to know right now. You need to be in a much better place before you know who it is that did it and why they did it.
Absolutely, and I think it's great because it leads to this therapy circle that Curtis calls. That's
a good way of calling it. That's a really good descriptor.
It's the Billy Russo therapy circle because Curtis, Frank, and Dinah are all affected by him.
Yeah.
I do like the moment as well because Dinah is approached by the Pilgrim in this episode, that she's at Frank going, who is this guy? What have you brought to New York, which is involving me now?
Yeah.
I really like that moment. You know, Curtis trying to keep it on track with this therapy session is about Billy Russo.
Absolutely. That's how you get through loads of exposition in a couple of seconds, isn't it? You have a really angry Madani walking into the room, phone in hand, going, oh God, you're back in the city. I told you to leave. Get out of here. And you've dropped something at my door, and you're still causing problems for me, even though I told you to leave. I love that moment as she just drops all this information on Frank. It's cool.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this therapy bit and Kurt's taking charge. One thing I do want to call back, just as a quick aside, is Ben Barnes' acting in this episode, especially in that Curtis scene. There was tears, there was spittle, there was there was condensation from speaking under the mask. So overall, again, Ben Barnes is kind of very much knocking it out of the park as this crazy jigsaw person, but also as someone who is mentally disabled at this point in time. In terms of lost memories.
And speaking of which, you do hear it from Curtis, where he says, you can see it in his eyes. He is crazy. This is a crazy version of Billy, And Curtis has known him for years as well, so he's now saying Billy's gone. The old Billy that you knew is gone. He's crazy.
The reason I laughed when he said therapy session, because it is. Frank goes, I've let 2 people live this week. I need to change it. I need to fix. So they made the decision that Frank vows he's going to kill Billy. And actually, for once, there's no backtrack by Madani. Everyone, even Curtis is gone. This is the way it has to be. He's getting out of control. Because we hear about how Billy is pulling the vets together. Now we always forget this, though. He's a Marine. He's able to command his presence, but he is able to shout orders and dictate army guys. And a lot of vets are trained from the army or their service that when someone shouts the order or someone senior shouts the order, you follow. There's no questioning. It's just bum, bum, bum. So we get this amazing scene where Billy is drinking with the vets, and we get introduced to it. Well, not introduced, but we see an additional 5, I think it is there. Plus one of the guys that Curtis is doing who gives him his glasses.
Jimbo.
Yes. And he gets his car towed, and they all run outside, and then literally Billy jumps into action. And he's like, you go that way, we come around this way. And it was literally like a military procedure, so we go fum, 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 fum.
It's like, let's use the pincer move. You guys, 3 on the left, 3 on the right, you stop in the road to do this. It's like the plan is straight out of Billy's mouth. Before he's even thinking about it, he's back in command again of his troops, and they all line up right behind him again,
Yeah.
It's a nice moment, that, I think, because it is this idea that Billy Russo is charismatic.
Yeah.
And he is someone that people are willing to follow. To me, this kind of plays a part with Dr. Dumont as well, I think, that is she transfixed a bit by Billy Russo because of that inherent charisma that he has, which I think is really good. Just as well, quickly for me, with the therapy circle, I do like the fact that as well, for Dinah Madani, it's because of this visit by Mahoney where he plays that honest cop routine with her, and he talks about, if I've ever seen a haunted enforcement officer, I see it in you. And he tries to get her to come clean, to set the record straight, to build that trust with her. Yeah. And when she kind of refuses, he talks about the kids on the carousel, how he goes and effectively gets it out of them that there was this third person on the carousel, and that it was Frank Castle.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Mahoney's great in this episode as well.
Yeah, he's really good.
Really, really good. That line to her saying, "I knew you were once an honest cop like me," it's really cutting to Madani. She still thinks she's on the right side of the law. Even though she's working with Frank, she still feels like she hasn't compromised her principles. And to get that from another cop, another man in the service, you can really see it cutting through her as a character.
Speaking of, Curtis's girlfriend's gonna die, correct? Like, we're all in agreement here. Like, we get it, first of all, told how much he loves her, or how much he really cares about her. We get introduced by a sex scene. We get a bit of backstory about how they cuddle in bed, and she's dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
This wasn't just to underline the piece of dialogue from a previous episode that he says he wants to have a relationship with this woman. This is definitely setting her up, so we know who she is when she gets kidnapped and taken by Billy's new gang, which is pretty much what's going to happen. But we'll see. We'll see how that's going to happen. Closing out this first mission for Billy and his gang, they go after the tow truck driver, they get the car back, and then Billy goes way too far and beats the guy on the ground with his gun, kind of pushing the rest of the band away, the rest of the gang away a little bit. But it does feel like if they hadn't been around, he would have killed them.
Yes, 100%.
He was going that far.
Definitely.
Yeah. But now they're a band of brothers. The band is getting together, whatever way you want to call it.
Yeah. Because we hear from Jimbo that he would be willing to follow him and do anything because he saved him and got his car back. If it wasn't for Billy, he wouldn't have gotten his car back. You hear him still justifying that what Billy did was right. This is a tow truck driver. He's paid to collect cars that are parked in the wrong place. He's just a normal, average New Yorker doing his job, getting beaten up. That's a pretty horrible way to end your day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. That's what I wasn't entirely sure. Was it just being towed because it was parked in the wrong place? Or, in the canteen, we do get that conversation after Curtis has given him new specs that he will now go and sort out his car because he'll be able to read the forms. So that there was something going on anyway, and I was wondering,
he hadn't taxed it, or
is that why it was being towed, or just that it was parked on double yellows or something?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was something to do. He hadn't taxed it or hadn't done some of the documentation on it. But yeah, I was taking it when I was watching the episode that maybe they were just drinking too long in the bar. He'd parked it for 2 hours and they were there for 7 or something. Like we hear that the reason why he's caught by the cops is because Jimbo pulls over after getting his car back and goes for a nap in his car. Well, the police are probably going to catch you if you do that as well.
Yeah, but also Jimbo is living out of his car.
Yes. Yeah,
So
everything he owns.
Everything he owns his car, and he was eating at the homeless shelter.
Yes.
So there's definitely that element to it as well.
Yeah.
So I think what they're going to go for on this is Billy's band is comprised completely of vets, basically Curtis's vets.
It's the hard done by vets, the ones that feel like the world didn't give them what they deserved after coming back from protecting the US in foreign countries. That's absolutely where we're going this season.
And we could rob a bank. I know just the place. We got that line. And then the smile from Billy. So we know, we're going to get all of the guys. So Billy's going to have his mask, and they're all going to have the henchman version of his mask. Right. It's going to be great.
Yes, we will see that in a future episode. Let's close out this episode with the talk about one final character, because another brilliantly directed scene, I think, here. The Pilgrim in New York. We heard about the fact that Pilgrim has been in New York before, didn't want to come back. We heard that from the conversation with the Schultzes in the past. He is not having a wonderful time in New York at all.
No, I love this scene. You just get the seething hatred that this guy has for New York, at least now in his new, purer form. And I think that back and forth between the relative sanctity of his hotel room and the hustle and bustle of New York on the streets in this restaurant where he's casing it, waiting for the chance to go after Madani to get information on Frank. And again, it's just a wonderful connection through this episode of him dealing with New York, and then that meeting between him and Madani. He knows Madani has lied, like Mahoney does, about the involvement of Frank and what actually happened on that carousel, to the point where he is so confident that she is not going to take him down. She's not going to slap the cuffs on him, and he walks away and says, come back to me when you're ready to talk. I thought that was really nicely done, actually.
Yeah.
I must say, I think Josh Stewart, who plays John Pilgrim, is absolutely holds that iconic Pilgrim look really nicely. I think some of the scenes he's in, his expressions of disdain or of this moral disdain, I think are really nicely portrayed by him, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Give him his own horror franchise. He's scaring the hell out of me every time he's on screen. I don't want to be anywhere near this guy. He's great. Really good.
Yeah, but the other thing I really liked about this is when Madani, has had that moment with the Pilgrim, she races back to the cafe and says, "Don't clean anything up." And for me, I agree with the forensic lab lady, where she's like, "I've been waiting for a moment like this. I think I would be the same. I would like, let's science the shit out of this."
Absolutely.
Now. It was so good.
It's that moment when you're living a real life CSI episode where you're going, I could use all my tools finally to track down this one person, because that never happens, even though it happens every single week on 20 different CSI programs. There's no way there's that many crimes that need to be solved in the way that they're solved in CSI. Loads of crimes happen, but not like the CSI ones.
Definitely. It was just a real nice moment here. And Madani's expression of like, okay, you weirdo. But for her, this is brilliant.
Absolutely. But Madani confirms it is totally confidential. Well, basically because she shouldn't be doing it. But that's why the forensic scientist is like, oh yes, I get to work on a confidential FBI or Homeland Security thing. Isn't that great? But we do have the other excellent moment with Pilgrim, which is probably shouldn't have been a shock, but we see the three Russians, Poloznev and his two guards, going up in a lift, and then the lift doors open and two bullets, both security guards on the ground, and then a little pause for a moment to allow Pilgrim to give one final look at Poloznev before he puts a bullet between his eyes as well. It's a great, gruesome moment for Pilgrim, showing how willing he is to kill anybody that gets in his way.
Not his way. Anyone who gets in the Schultz's way. And I think that's the really interesting point. When we see the Pilgrim is in his hotel room, he is reading the Bible, and right beside it is the family photo with his wife standing and the two kids. So I'm getting it's all for the family. Like, he wants his family so much to be safe. Yeah, he's basically doing this for the kids and the wife.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also formed a really good counterpoint to that moment in the cafe of the mental and craziness that is New York, and then this absolute solitary silence that's in the hotel when he's reading his Bible and looking at the photograph of his family. It's a great juxtaposition between those two moments in his life, I suppose.
Yeah. Did you see one of the cool things, though, is he has the three folders on the desk at the beginning of the episode. And we see Madani, we see Frank, and we never got shown the third photo.
Right.
So the third photo was Poloznev.
Right, very good.
At the end of this episode, we find that out.
Yeah.
Because he was there sent to kill three people. Like, it's a blink and you'll miss it.
Yeah.
Because you just see Madani and you see Frank, and I'm like, are they going to show us the third? Oh, no. And then I just forgot about it until the end.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Nice touch. Any other blink and you'll miss it moments, or we move on to our defense, Chris?
No blink or you'll miss it moments in this one. Unfortunately, not for me.
No, not for me either.
And I've already mentioned what Nakazat means, so nothing else from me.
Yeah, so with that, Chris, do you defend episode 6 of The Punisher, Nakazat?
I don't. Unfortunately, some of the storylines are falling flat for me. In particular, the two men kissing reveal and why this is all happening, the Schultzes, and it's all falling flat because either we don't know more about it or it was just a massive missed beat. Because it's not shocking. I get it. A religious family may find this bad, but we weren't given any more context.
Yeah.
We weren't shown this man running for potential presidential candidacy, and we weren't shown him. If he had been in the church talking at the very first or second episode, that would have made sense. Like, if he had been there and he was the pillar of the community and things like that, we just don't have any of that.
Absolutely. It's the way it's stripped out as, they have a son, and he's running for president, and he's gay. Haha, there's our big reveal. Yeah, it's all done in 1 or 2 lines of dialogue rather than being shown over the 5 episodes of the show. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. So for that storyline has been, to a degree, zeroed out. And then I've been calling for a while with the Billy and Dumont that they're going for a Joker and Harley Quinn, and I don't enjoy it. I've seen it before played out through comic books, through like there's no fresh take on this right now. Like nothing that's making me go, this is a cool take on that Harley Quinn Joker relationship, or this is a different take on a Stockholm Syndrome relationship, or just there's nothing really that's making me go, okay, like what, like I'm like, okay, just get to it. Tell me where, like make her full on his, or like this back and forth for 6 episodes when we clearly see it coming from like episode 3. Yeah. I'm like, come on. So look, I'm not, this is the first episode I'm saying I don't defend, because I'm hoping that all these points pay off further on, and like it's just a misstep. That's it. Like I'm hoping these are missteps, and they're gonna rewrite the course, if you will, in the next episode or in the following episode. But there's still a lot to love here. There's still some really good acting, like John Bernthal's acting, Ben Barnes' acting, is spectacular. Yeah. Or even Georgia Williams' acting. Like, everyone is a fantastic actor in this. Like, they're all going above and beyond. It was just very much, unfortunately, a thread of storylines that have no payoff. Yeah. So, unfortunately, I can't defend this episode. I will, as I said, hold my overall opinion to a later episode. And if I need to, I'll come back and I'll go, actually, now that we know more about it, I will have potentially defended this. But as of right now, no.
Right.
John, on that bombshell, do you defend this episode of The Punisher?
It's funny. I just defend this episode of The Punisher. I mean, the sad thing for me, I think, is this actually would have been my 5 out of 5. I do think there is an awful lot to love about this episode. I just think from the opening, I think, as you said, Chris, it is the best opening so far this season. Mm-hmm. I think this, for me, is the best Madani episode because she's pushed by Mahoney. Yeah. And I think it really brings these storylines together with that therapy circle at the end. I love that we see Curtis with Billy Russo. I think even seeing Russo and Dumont's relationship change unexpectedly. A lot happens here with Billy. And you have Frank and Amy have that moment. I think the problem is we needed more Schultz. That revelation of the Schultz and of their son just didn't work for me because we didn't have enough. And unfortunately, that is a massive part of this episode and actually the season so far. So it's a little undermining, as we've talked about. And for that reason, I do defend this, and I give it a relatively high score with 1 ding and 3 bangs. I give it 4 elevators of death out of 5, because I think it should have been 5. Right. And maybe I should take more than just 1 point on my scale because of the Schultzes. But I think, like we've mentioned, possibly there's a zigzag here that zigzags, and it will become apparent, and maybe we get more. But this reveal, which I think was the big part here, just didn't work for me. Yeah. I think maybe it could be closer to a 3, but that doesn't work with the 3 guys that died in the elevator, unfortunately. So I'm kind of slightly constrained by my own crazy scoring method, but
you don't have to include the ding.
Okay, well then, I
agree with you.
I think it's between 3 and 4 out of 5, but I do really think this would have been my 5 out of 5 if the whole Schultz thing had worked, and it didn't. With hindsight of the previous episodes, it would have worked if we'd just gotten some more storyline with them. Got to know the Schultzes and their crazy ways, to be honest. So I do just about defend this episode, but it's a tough one for me, to be honest. I do defend this. Derek, do you defend this episode of The Punisher?
I'm totally with both of you guys. With you, John, saying that I do defend it because if something happens in the future, then that's fine if they do it well. But right now, for this particular episode, I'm with you, Chris, that I can't defend it because the episode itself did everything, all the big reveals wrong here. You know, that first moment when you finally get that photograph developed that we've heard about since the first episode of the show, we should have been going, oh my God, look at the photograph. That's X character that we know for the last 5 episodes. Whereas I wrote it in the notes. Oh, they developed a photograph. There's 2 guys in it. Who are they? I don't know. It's like it meant nothing. And then they spent half an hour of an episode getting to the point where they find out who it is. And even that reveal was, really? Okay. Oh, they have a son who's age enough that he could be going for president. Okay, that's new news. Oh, and he's gay. Oh, okay, that's new news. Oh, and you don't like him being gay. Oh, that's also new news, all told to you in a line of dialogue by a character we've never met before. So, did any of that matter? Not really. Had it been revealed differently, had we seen these characters together over the course of the last couple of episodes, absolutely, this entire episode would have worked so much better. But we do get some great moments in the episode, which is why I'm quite high on it. I love Pilgrim in New York. I love his reaction to all the mess that's going on around him. I love that scene with Billy and Curtis when they're finally meeting back up after everything that Billy had done to Curtis last season, and Billy trying to be apologetic for something he doesn't even know whether he should apologise for because he doesn't remember it. I think that's a great scene. And John Bernthal and Georgia Wingham in this episode, their conversation outside of the school when Amy is telling Frank to think about his daughter possibly being eligible to go to that school across the road, and you see his heart break thinking about the idea that he's lost his daughter and not being able to see her future. It's beautiful, absolutely great, a wonderful scene. I think that scene on its own, taken out of the episode, could be one of those standout moments from the season. So loads of great things about the episode, a couple of missteps, and unfortunately the missteps are to do with the overarching story of the entire season. So that's why it's a bit poor to have them in this episode.
So, gun to your head.
Uh-huh.
Defends or do not defend?
I'm going to have to say defend because of how great some of those scenes are, and without this episode, those scenes wouldn't be there. So I have to say I defend the episode. So, but I'm hoping we're going to get something more in episode 7 when we get onto it. Gentlemen, let's see what other people have to say about the episodes of Punisher so far. Let's get into our feedback section.
Yes, some feedback for episode 4 from Bob Phillips. He says, so if Chris Jones's 3-episode arc structure is right, I think we are in the evolution of Billy phase. Ooh. And good call, Derek O'Neill, about the mask decorating as a therapeutic act. Pretty Ben is scarred, but it's adding to his intrigue along with the possible traumas which have set him on the way. He kept making bad choices, but has had the deck loaded against him. Amy is perhaps being held up as an alternative. Not quite good, but choosing more wisely. What I really want to know is how long before Madani and Frank end up in bed. Let's hope not. I think
I was expecting Mahoney and Madani at this stage. As we get into episode 6, I'm
Really?
thinking Mahoney and Madani might have a relationship kicking off here.
Curtis.
and Mahoney and Billy and Frank and Madani. Maybe it should be, yeah.
Let's solve it through love, not war,
Yeah,
in the final
yeah,
episode.
exactly.
Yes, I like
A
it.
menage a trois. A
They could
trois. A
all,
trois.
they could all go to Curtis's sex hotel.
maybe. Well done, Dr. Phillips, as well. Over on Twitter, he actually shared an image of a therapeutic mask that was created for a kid who was going through some really poor times in her life. So, yes, that is something that's absolutely done, having people design masks to emphasize things that they want to see on the outside. In this case, Billy chose the mask to emphasize the bad things he sees on his inside. So I'm really glad I got that right without any medical training at all.
Well done. And I'm going to congratulate myself because actually our 3-episode arc structure is still, as of end of episode 6, kind of working out.
Maybe.
Like literally, like we've just got the end of the photos arc now in New York. So we're on to the next arc, which is the Schultzes and their gay son. Wow. Okay. I thank you, Bob, for basically reminding me of that because I forgot to even think about that. Yeah.
And I'm here too. Providing excellent sounding board for all the other hosts of Defenders TV podcast. No, big thanks, Bob, for all the feedback. Really good to hear your thoughts on that, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bob. Our other piece of feedback comes in from Jim Carey. He says, glad the bartender is gone, but I expect she'll be used as a hostage material eventually. This show right now is very interesting. I never followed Punisher solo and don't know about these bad guys. Obviously, Jigsaw sounds like a recurring favourite. Wondering if we'll get Micro or any powered cameos. Could use a good night nurse right now. Yeah, as we said earlier on in our podcast, Jim, there's actually no character called Pilgrim in the comic book, so this is a brand new character for the show. Jigsaw, again, very different storyline for Jigsaw in this show than in the comic book, so I don't think we'd be spoiling anything by saying that he is a villain of Frank. We know he's Jigsaw now. because of the scars on his face, we know that he's Jigsaw. He's kind of been referred to, but I think that's all we're going to get. We're probably not going to get a storyline from the comic books translated into the show for the future of this. As for any other cameos, I'm thinking we're probably not going to get Micro back in this season. I think I've mentioned it before that I think his story's done. We may get him for a phone call to help Frank out, but we're probably not going to get him in the show itself. And this show, as for powered cameos, I kind of feel like the Punisher is one of those ones that's trying to steer very clear of the MCU, very clear of the powered individuals that are in other shows. They have said if there's going to be a season 3, we may get Daredevil in that show, but as of right now, I'm thinking this show is going to stay with the Army and with those type of foes.
It's a different style of show. It's based in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things can interact, such as Daredevil. But the Punisher punishment is different. It's a war comic, if you will. It's an action military comic.
Absolutely. Jim Carrey goes on to say, little detail, does anyone else think the closing music, the pre-credit kind of outro jingle or whatever it's called, is sometimes a bit inappropriate? Sounds like something from a cheap sitcom occasionally. It's a weird one, isn't it? Punisher has always been associated with like metal music. You know, even the first trailer for season 1 had Metallica on it, you know? Yeah. One of those kind of things that you've always seen, you know, people with the skull tattoo on their shoulders are always metalheads, really, you know, for the most part. But I would kind of see this version of Frank Castle. I'd see him in a bar, you know, like the one we saw at the start of this season, in this kind of bar with, you know, kind of rock country music playing, which is what this theme always sounded like. It had a mix of that kind of country music, that rock music, and a bit of the Army kind of vibe to it as well. So I've always liked this theme tune, but of course it's never going to work on every single episode. And to be honest, Netflix goes so bloody fast. At the end of the episode, I hear about 3 seconds of it before I'm reaching for the controller, so I don't get to see the next episode. So I get to turn it off as quickly as possible. So I've never really noticed the jarring nature in the final piece. It just tells you this is the end of the show. We're on to the next episode. And finally, Jim says on that, he says, on many standard TV shows, they have variations of closing music for it. 24 had special graphics if the main character died, for example, in an episode. We've kind of been saying this about the Netflix shows. They kind of stick with their opening and closing themes. They don't really change them season to season. I know a show like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., for example, also an ABC Marvel show, does change its intro every season. They have a different symbol for the show, each season showing progression of all of the characters. But I think that's just a different type of show than we get on Netflix. They've chosen their style of character, and it's supposed to inform you what type of show you're watching, not what type of episode you're watching.
Exactly. And also, Netflix, you don't get the full outros because typically it auto plays the next episode for you within 5 seconds, which is getting shorter and shorter. That jump for myself and Derek when we're trying to go for the remote. And then the intro, now they allow you to skip the intros. So a lot of people, I remember reading a piece on Netflix saying that more and more they're seeing that feature becoming more and more used. Because when people are binging certain shows and you've selected skip intro on one of them, it will skip the intro on multiple ones then. Right. So, for example, I watched Big Bang again, just having the background, and I skipped it on one, and then all of a sudden it was skipping it for me in the app on the follow-up ones because it was just running in the background. And I'm like, that's very interesting.
The Big Bang Theory?
Yes.
Can you find a way to skip the entire show so I never have to see it?
Yeah, I can. It's actually called Don't Watch It.
Yep. I've done that. That's always good. Always good. Let's go on to some episode 5 feedback, Chris.
Sure. Michael Walling said, it seems like Amy is Frank's new Micro for this season, considering her decent tech savviness. I have no idea if Micro shows up this season, but I think I'll be okay with it as long as Amy sticks around as Frank's new sidekick. Yeah, thanks, Mike. We actually talked about this a lot. I know Derek's very adamant, kind of, Micro's storyline is done, we don't really need him back. I'm with you. I'm like, I'd like to see him come in for one, just to outfit the Punisher a bit, but I'm with you in that Amy is the new Micro. Amy is the new, I don't want to say sidekick, like, she's the little Punisher. LIL-Punisher.
Yeah, I can see that, and I think one of the things that's different about The Punisher as a show is that it feels like they're not trying to create a cast of characters that surround Frank. It feels like, yes, we've got Madani in here, and we've got Billy, and we've got Curtis, but it's not like he's got his entire team together working on a problem. So it feels like people will constantly come in and out of Frank's life, help him out in certain situations, and then they'll go away, and Frank will continue on with his next phase in his life, whatever that may mean. So I don't know whether we're going to see other people coming back in that worked really closely with Frank, and I don't know whether after this season will we see Amy again. I don't know, but I definitely know Frank obviously will be his type of person, and he will bring people in and out as he needs them.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for the feedback. I would love to see Micro come back as well.
I'm the only one. I love the actor. And I love the character of Micro as well. I just don't expect to see him back.
Yeah, I think, it would be nice to see him back. Some more feedback on episode 5. Bob Phillips says, the evolution of Billy carries on with greater control, and I think the first steps to a jigsaw army. Nice. And the joy of punishment appears in the gym. As the saying goes, no pain, no gain. Absolutely, Bob. Thank you for that. I'm very, very happy that my workouts in the gym don't end up with that amount of pain, though.
True.
I'm a little squeamish. In fact, I may do power walking on the treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the name Jigsaw Army because that means then everyone is a piece.
I like it.
Look at you.
See, look at this.
Nice. Thanks so much for all the feedback. Great to hear from all of our fellow Defenders as well. If you want to send us any feedback, you can email us to feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. You can go to our website at defenderstvpodcast.com and record any feedback you have on any episode of the show, up to 90 seconds of your thoughts, and we'll talk about them on our next episode. Please come back and join us next week for our review of The Punisher Season 2, Episode 7. Oh, go on then. And also make sure you subscribe to the podcast over at defenderstvpodcast.com. Loads of options there. We've got Stitcher, we've got Spotify, we've got Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, loads of options there for you to subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to Defenders TV Podcast, because next week, on the 30th of January, we have the 400th issue of Doctor Strange coming out. So we'll be talking about the 400th issue of a comic book next week on Strange Tales on Defenders TV Podcast, which you'll get through our full Defenders TV Podcast feed. I think that's all I have to promote for this week.
Yeah, I think it will be a smorgasbord of Defenders TV podcasts next week. The Punisher, and then a bit of comics for light relief, I would say.
And of course, come and join us over on Gotham TV Podcast for our coverage of the final season of Gotham.
Yes, Crazy Gotham is in full swing. We have started doing our 3 most surprising moments of the episodes. They have gone so, dare I say it, batshit crazy. It's good fun down in Gotham.
Absolutely.
With a lot of blood as well. It's not far off the Punisher for the litres of blood used, I would think.
Maybe. It's definitely a different feeling watching an episode of Gotham versus an episode of Punisher, I will say.
But
so I'm glad we have both sides of that.
Absolutely. But fellow Defenders, we will be back with our review of The Punisher, Season 2, Episode 7, One Bad Day, which will be up next Tuesday.
How cool is that? That was an episode of Gotham last season as
it
well.
Really
One
was.
Bad Day. You know, we have Joker and Harley Quinn. We've got One Bad Day coming up next week. Look at this. Just everything's crossing over.
This is so 2018.
Everything's coming up, Millhouse. Thanks so much for joining us. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Yeah, as always, fellow Defenders, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll speak with you again soon. Bye.
Ding.
I hear a lot of people saying the blues, but I'm gonna tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got to